Hi, sorry I'm late, but it sounds like we haven't started yet.
No, I think we need a chair here to start, don't we, Kevin?
Yeah, we're waiting on Mary. We might have to text her. I don't know if she knew if this was the time or not.
We just finished, Kevin. You missed it all. We got a whole plan for the next 3 decades.
Is that a new haircut, Evan? All right.
It was getting hot.
Are you back in Moab? I saw you were hanging out up in the Tetons area for a bit.
Yeah. We Hawk had been with my mom for a few weeks, and so we went to scoop him up at Salt Lake and swung through
Nice.
Wyoming on the way. Yeah.
Some of my friends said they saw you on the way through.
Yeah, it was perfect, man. Rolled into the shop and was like, "Oh, hey." And
Yeah.
Evan ran us a shuttle. He offered out of the blue. It was sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. I'm up in Sun Valley currently borrowing a friend's spare bedroom for this.
Nice.
Yeah.
How's the temps there?
They turned really good yesterday and got some rain. It was super hot the first day we got here 2 days ago. Everything got nicer and did a nice long ride yesterday.
Cool. Do they run the lifts up there?
They might. I haven't ridden the lift. The backcountry riding here is just so good. I have a
Yeah.
good friend up here, and we generally just do some 3 or 4 hour backcountry rides that are amazing. Did you get to ride at Targhee?
Yeah, I did, but I mean, it wasn't that special, honestly.
No.
We did a cool ride at the end that like kind of went past the base area, so we like left the car at the bottom of
Mhm.
Teton Canyon,
Right.
and that was my favorite part. And then and then there was these other trails that they didn't recommend because they weren't like burnt in. They were just like loose, like whatever.
Mhm.
It was kind of like Hell's Canyon, and that was like my favorite part. I was like, oh yeah, this is great.
Oh yeah.
And
That's
then
That's a wee
but
Moab bike, right?
yeah, the riding on Teton Pass was better than riding the lifts, I think. So
Teton Pass is super fun. I was over there last year and did a few rides with David up there.
yeah.
But just I texted with Mary. She thought it was starting at 2 for some reason.
So maybe Gabe could start it if Mary is okay with that. I don't know. Or is she getting on soon?
Let me check.
I think with
I don't have a reply yet.
lack of attendance, I think that would fall in Gabe's lap.
Oh, here she comes. She's
Okay.
live.
I just like to give Gabe extra stuff to do.
I appreciate that.
Isn't the vice chair in charge of snacks? Do we have some?
To toss y'all some virtual snacks throughout the meeting.
The vice chair was in charge of vice.
Oh yeah, there you go.
That's no problem.
That's a sharp shirt, Gabe. I like the Swaros.
Thank you. Thank you. I got some flowers on the back of it too.
Oh, right on. Nice.
Let's
Yeah,
see.
you ever go to these conferences and like the other county, they have like embroidered shirts. We need to get, some good cowboy shirts with our county logo embroidered on it.
Keep us all looking dapper.
It's
Get all
No,
that
that's-
counted up.
Sarah and I were talking about that when we went to that Huntington Canyon. Some sharp polo shirts with the correct acronym. It's nice. It's not. It wouldn't be a complete frivolous use of discretionary funds. By my estimation.
In Surprise, Arizona, we actually had swag. We had a whole store, and we had surprise T-shirts, golf clubs. We had all kinds of stuff, and I think we have coffee cups here.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Did everything from Surprise come with the exclamation point at the end?
It did, exactly. Have you seen it?
No.
Huh?
So Chris, did you say Mary was coming on, or should we? If she's going to be here momentarily, we might as well wait. Or
Well, she joined, but it just keeps saying that she's connecting to audio, so maybe she's having some technical problem here.
okay.
Chris, are you in touch with Mary, or should I continue to text with her?
Well, I can see that she's trying to join.
Yeah, I see that too. Yeah.
But no.
I'll try giving her a call.
Okay.
Sarah, you were just up here in Idaho recently, correct?
Yeah, we were in the mountains, kind of between Ketchum and Stanley, and
Yeah, I texted with Neil. Are Neil and Emily still up there?
they're trying to avoid the smoke while still going north, which is proving impossible. But they went up to Montana.
Oh, okay, awesome. Yeah, texted briefly with Neil. We're up in Sun Valley and we do a little backpacking in the Sawtooth before getting back to Moab next week.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
That's
But
nice.
I tell you what, Southern Idaho is going to have a hard time with tourism in the coming years as climate change accelerates the burning of those forests. It's
Yeah,
really hard to do anything when smoke is settling in all the valleys.
yeah. We actually got
Mary
some-
says she's trying to join.
It rained quite a bit up here yesterday,
Oh, that's good.
which was really nice. It cleared the smoke out nicely.
I got to hike through some really beautiful burned areas. They were probably like 12 or 15 years old.
Yeah.
And it makes me excited to see what Gold Basin looks like.
Mhm. Yeah. I rode my bike up to Pat Creek and saw the fire burned area for the first time a few days ago, and it was pretty shocking.
Oh, I was actually surprised at how many areas, maybe a little bit lower down, didn't burn. I guess the maps they sent out led me to believe that, like, the confluence of Dory and Brumley and downstream of there was burned pretty badly, and it didn't appear to be.
Yeah. It was weird how there was lots of random little bits that were unburned and then other parts that were just completely burned.
Well, maybe we should at least do some of
Yeah.
the preliminary stuff.
Very well. I will go ahead and call to order this workshop of the Grand County Commission. It's 2:42 p.m. This strategic plan workshop on the 20th of July, 2021. I guess I will just turn it over to John Gunther to begin our discussion and workshop today. Thanks, John.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully you will be able to see the first agenda item here. And thank you very much, commissioners and the elected officials and staff participating. The goal here would be, I think, to do a brainstorming exercise to start off. We're not going to get to the full strategic plan, as you probably most realize if you've ever been through this, in 2 hours or an hour and 45 minutes. If we can achieve good brainstorming comments in the SWOT exercise, and we have a PEST exercise, we're swatting at a PEST here, so that may sound negative, but it's got some positives. This fits into hopefully the next phase of evaluation, where we start taking some of the brainstorming ideas and putting them into a framework that is got a mission statement or good vision qualities to it, values, objectives, and measures. And those measures can be really helpful when we start moving ahead with the general plan, and when we start moving ahead with our public engagement strategy. That's kind of on the commission agenda today, with a public engagement strategist working with us on a part-time basis. And then the other element is the community engagement part. I understand the city of Moab's going through a consulting process on this very subject right now, and they'll be looking to hire someone as well. So it'd be good to compare notes with them as we start moving ahead. So I got a couple of quotes in purple here. I've changed the agenda a bit. Actually, I've not changed any of the substance from what you've got in your packet, but I've actually just reformatted some of the slides because they needed attention. And
Sorry, John, I just got a text from Mary saying she's waiting to be let in. Maybe, does Chris need to do something?
She's in.
Is she in?
Yep.
Man, I'm sorry.
Okay, welcome, Mary. Sorry to interrupt you, John.
oh, that's okay. So we're good to go. Mary, you're there?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay. So we're just doing a bit of introduction here, Mary, and talking about the goals of this workshop is to try to get and achieve a really thorough brainstorming exercise from all the commission members around the SWOT exercise, and we'll have a PEST test exercise here too. And the goal would then to be come back later and evaluate that report on what those elements look like, and potentially in the next session draft a vision statement with objectives, values, and some indicators or outcomes. As part of the process, that will hopefully feed into a community engagement component as well, and a community kind of values or strategic planning exercise. As I mentioned already, City of Moab's doing the same thing right now. They're hiring a consultant. It looks like we're talking to Carly yesterday. And that would be one of the things to maybe compare notes with. I'm not sure regionally if there's any other exercises going on in the San Juan County or other jurisdictions, but that's always helpful too. So a couple quotes here. As I mentioned, I did change, we might have to mute somebody here. I'm not sure who that is, but we did change not so much the substance, but I did reformat some of the slides and some of the presentation just to make it clearer. But the substance of the package is pretty well the same. So I started off with, without vision, the people perish. With a good, strong vision and a good buy-in, then it tends to set the tone. Some people will look at some vision statements and think they're pretty fuzzy and they really have very little to deliver. But when you start looking at the context-rich words that come out of them, there are ways of measuring those. And that's an important thing to think about as indicators. So also, we need to name the plan. I've called it the land for all seasons, which I thought was, I don't know, that might be an idea, but maybe we should have a contest for naming the general plan. So as I mentioned, the purpose is to develop a vision statement with principles and objectives and measures that informs both the county commission and a community strategic plan. Staff will follow through a document for consideration. So the first slides I wanted to go to are in your package, and I'm not sure if these come up when do you see that when I change this? Do you see the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I believe so.
No, I'm still seeing the agenda, John.
Are you? Okay,
Maybe you have to unshare and then share a different window.
right. How about that? Does that work?
Yes, you can see that.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to scroll through these slides rather than doing a slideshow. That way we can stop and move back and forth easier than actually doing the slideshow. So this is a Sedona example. It may not be the greatest reference for us, but it's got elements that are somewhat similar. Smaller city, somewhat confined, but it also has a county regional area as well around it. So, and a very resort oriented area. their strategic plan is fairly recent, and they do embed this into their general plan. We'll take a look at the Park City example here in a minute too. So their vision example is Sedona is a community that nurtures, they say is, so they're talking about what they currently are, that nurtures connections between people, encourages healthy and active lifestyles, and supports a diverse and prosperous economy with priority given to the protection of the environment. So you can see that within the vision statement, they've already set priorities, and that's really important. I think it's got to be a holistic statement. It's got to have something that deals with both the community, the people, how the people are engaged, and usually the economy and the environment are part of it. So you can see there's three elements of the stool of the planning and sustainability stool there: economy, environment, and people, social. So then they break each one of those elements down into 5, 6 objectives here: environmental stewardship, community connections, improve traffic flow, which is a funny objective actually, but you'll see it kind of fleshes out a bit. Walkability. This is one of those exercises that we did with staff, and I asked everyone what they thought walkability meant. And is walkability important to you? I won't ask that yet, but I think as you start, asking these questions, you can start to finesse the meaning of each one of them, because every one of these has different meanings for different people sometimes, but they really do define elements of long-range planning in a lot of ways. In other words, walkability within the smart growth context is saying, if there's a battle between a car and a pedestrian, the pedestrian always wins. The car always loses. Now, you may not agree with that, but that's what smart growth talks about. In other words, sidewalks, walkability, parking is minimized, street occupancy of people occupancy of streets and public spaces is very important. So environmental stewardship, Sedona is known for practices that respect and protect the natural environment, and as the responsible caretaker of one of the world's greatest treasures. Now you can almost transplant some of these comments into Grand County without too much difficulty. Community connections is the social part of it, the engagement part. We meet at events and at random to share experiences, help others, improve our community, enjoy the arts, and celebrate our heritage. Improve traffic flow. This one's an interesting one. We travel efficiently through Sedona using safe roads, pedestrian and bicycle pathways, and convenient transit. Now, most people, when they see improved traffic flow, it means cars. As most people think of cars. But you'll see that it's much more holistic than that. Walkability. We enjoy the option of walking for pleasure or purpose from neighborhoods, from shops, restaurants, transit, trailheads linked by safe, practical, enjoyable routes. Now, to do a good walkable neighborhood, you need a number of various things. And one of them is you need place. You need mixed use. You need retail as well as residential. And you should have parks, and you should have public venues as well. So there should be a mix of those kinds of things. Normally the industrial areas are usually not considered walkable, depending if it's light industrial or not. So there's the Sedona example. And I'm gonna go to hopefully this one. And hopefully you can see this one. So here's Park City's long-term strategic plan. You'll see that it's pretty well developed. First of all, they got a motif with a tree, and they have roots at the bottom with their historic character, small town, sense of community, and natural setting. Then the trunk are part of what their objectives are. And then you'll see values that are kind of out on the leaves themselves. And not a bad motif, I think, in a lot of ways. And let's take a look at how it's developed. So the next slide's actually got their core values in them: a sense of community, if you can see that, okay, natural setting, small town, and historic character. I'm going to skip a couple of slides here, just go down to a couple of important things, I think. In fact, I'm going to skip most of them and come to the end here. So one of the objectives here, and I'm going to expand this one, you'll see that I did show a slide earlier in redeveloping the general plan. This is very similar. So you see the community vision, the council goals, strategic and desired outcomes, programs and services, and in the annual budget. It's almost the same flow that we were discussing when we talked about the strategic plan, general plan, master plans, then budget and indicators. So it's almost that same kind of interplay. And then one is always, it's cyclical because one is informing and updating the other. So with a good long-range strategic plan and a good general plan, a good solid annual budgetary process and master plans, these tend to build on each other and they become more mature as time goes by. You'll see on the right-hand side, the long-term strategic plan relationship between the general plan. I mean, I never saw this before, but this is the kind of relationship that works well. And both the examples that we had shown in Sedona and this one in Park City are very similar because they have these parts linked together. Now, it's not that the general plan depends on the strategic plan or vice versa, but because they're both long-range visioning documents, the question you're asking is, what do you want to be in 20 years? You wouldn't ask, what do you want to be in 2 years? That's too short term. What do you want to be in 20 years? Now, at this point, I usually stop and say to people, most people on this call can remember something 20 years ago and have seen the change. Gabriel, you might be an exception, I'm not sure. And Sarah might be an exception too. But the example I always use is the expo in Vancouver, which was started, it was in '86. That whole area of Falls Creek, an expo, was completely undeveloped. It was full of warehouses and empty warehouses and a port area that was dilapidated. And within 20 years, that whole master plan developed into what's called kind of the west end of Vancouver, part of the west end of Vancouver. But that whole area has been densified and developed since then. And that took 20 years. And that kind of thing, even though it seems like a long time, happens pretty fast. So I'm sure, and I can't do this in Moab, but I'm sure if you look around at places in probably the last 5 years, they won't change. But if you look back 20 years over a master plan, those kinds of things, even though they seem like it take a long time, they happen pretty fast. So here we are starting off with the exercise. Any questions so far about any comments? I'm sure some of you have been through strategic planning before. And usually they're over a day and a half, part of the budget cycle too. So 4 steps here. The first one is a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The next one is a political, economic, social, and technological, which is the PEST. Then a debrief and analysis. The last 2 steps we probably won't get to in this exercise because we'll be looking for you to brainstorm and think through some of these areas. The next slide I wanted to go, and it's a pretty busy slide here. I might actually do this on a PowerPoint here. So the SMART growth principles, there can be many of those. The American Planning Association has about 12 of them. And I think if you look at the way these SMART growth principles are, I think this is the kind of thing I'm guessing that most general plans should have. We always put these at the core of the general plan, and they actually help inform both the strategies and all the other elements in the plan. So efficient use of land and infrastructure, creation or enhancement of economic value, a greater mix of uses and housing choices, neighborhoods and communities focused around human scale, so not necessarily large scale. That's the neighborhood. They're not talking about big boxes because those usually aren't considered part of the neighborhood. Balanced and multimodal transportation system providing increased transportation choice. Now, when you think about each one of these will have deliverables or measures that you'll want to record and report on. I discovered on this proprietary program today called Townfolio, they actually have us mapped. They have a dashboard for Grand County. And I didn't know if you know that, but they actually have all the elements, demographic, social, economic, and they need to be better developed, but that stuff's already out there. So we could actually import that dashboard if you wanted to. Conservation and enhancement of environmental and cultural resources, preservation of and creation of a sense of place. That takes, it takes forethought to do that. It takes good planning to think about those. It takes agreement amongst elected officials, administration, and partners. Increase citizen participation in all aspects of the planning process. What we always say is early and ongoing public engagement. Now, that's the nature of planning, which we always promote that. Even though it may seem raw at times, and I know it will get raw, and I know you've probably been through this before, But that's one of the things that we do is we work together to build those relationships. So the preservation and creation of space is an interesting comment because it's not just building and developing, it's holding on to what is valued as well. That's part of the planning exercise. A vibrant center city life. This one's got the element of growth management in it. But if you put growth and management together, you realize that it's not just just growth for growth's sake. It's actually thinking about how growth can be managed. And in many cases, the levels of service need to be in where the infrastructure is. Vital small towns and rural areas. A multidisciplinary inclusionary process to accomplish smart growth. So it's dealing and getting at all of the underserved people that may not show up at meetings, not just the ones that are the most vocal, although those are important too, but it's trying to source the people that aren't part of that process. That's not always easy. Planning processes and regulations at multiple levels that promote diversity and equity. So this is thinking about how it can permeate all of our decision making. Regional view of community economy and ecological sustainability. So thinking regionally, because we know that rivers don't stop at boundaries, neither does the road stop at boundaries, and neither does the geology, or nor does the sky. It all carries over the boundary. Recognition that institutions, governments, businesses, and individuals require a concept of cooperation to support. Local, state, and federal policies and programs, it's always linking those together to work together constructively. Sometimes that's a challenge, obviously, but well-defined community edges, such as agricultural green belts, wildlife corridors, or greenways. And we have a number of community edges here. We have a city edge, we have a national park edge, and we have state park edges, and we have SITLA edges, and we have BLM edges. We got lots of edges. And that's one of the objectives in the plan, is to actually work through all of those elements and how they relate to each other. This exercise is one I've done a number of times before. The one on the left is a mall. As you can see, a very car-dominated mall, although parking's always is internal, which is interesting. To the upper part of that is the residential area. You can't go from the residential area to the mall by walking. You have to drive, even though you can throw a rock from the residential area and hit the commercial area. I don't know if anyone's experienced this. This exists in lots of car-dominated planning. The other one on this side is this is a comparison to what's called Euclidean zoning, which is basically separating uses on the left. Non-use based is emerging those into a sense of place, where you're actually mixing those uses together, as long as they're somewhat compatible. And residential, commercial tend to be compatible. Batch plants and large heavy industrial aren't. And what I usually do, and I'll pick on somebody here. I'm going to pick on Kevin and ask them, what's your sense? What's your feel of this slide, Kevin? Where's that? When do you feel it?
It looks like the aspect ratio is messed up. That Jeep looks a little funny.
Yeah.
But let's see. I would say, not such a pleasant place to walk, not really pedestrian oriented. I think that's my first impression.
Okay, Gabe?
Yeah, it does. I don't see, I guess I would just follow up with that and just say that I don't see anyone walking anywhere here. So it appears to be sort of starkly car oriented. And I see a lot of indications of what one might classify as chain type retail business, or that kind of business activity, rather than what might be construed as a locally owned business.
Okay. Sarah, what would you feel like if you were walking down that sidewalk?
It looks kind of hot. There's not very many trees. There's no bike lanes. It's pretty far to go to. Maybe, is that a church?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is. Okay, Evan, any comments? Any feel what the feeling of that streetscape is?
I think these guys hit it. I would kind of echo a lot of that. I would point out, though, that there's not much congestion in the vehicles.
So pretty easy mobility for a car. So that'd be, from a level of service in the transportation area, that'd probably be an A, because there's not hardly any vehicles. Although there are traffic lights, you'd think at some point there might be. Okay, Mary, go ahead.
I'm guessing it's not a highway.
It's not the 191.
It doesn't look very, it doesn't look very pleasant to me. It doesn't look like someplace I'd want to hang out. Maybe if I had to go get something, I'd go get something there, but it's no place, it's dark.
Okay, how does that change it, Mary, for you?
This new one?
Yeah.
Well, the building with the awnings is a little more inviting.
Okay.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I'm just asking, what do you think that is? Does it improve the streetscape? Does it improve the nature of the land use, the area, the engagement that you would have in the community itself?
A little bit. It's not a whole lot. No,
Okay.
It's a little more inviting than the previous picture where you didn't see the building with the awnings, but it still looks pretty industrial and no shade.
One of the things about bringing a building closer to the street, what does it do when you do that? When you bring this closer to where the street sidewalk area is and you have the street presence here, what does that do?
The building actually creates some shade, and when you're walking down the sidewalk, it gives you something to look at, like window shopping.
Right, Jock. What do you think, Jock? What do you think about the sense of mobility when the building's brought closer?
I think it looks better. It looks. I've lived in cities. It looks a little bit more like a more pleasant place. My first impression of the slide was it was stark. I didn't see any shade at all, so the shade helped. Actually, the guy on the bike crossing the path helped me. That's always a friendly sign for me that someone's at least riding their bike around there.
Okay, let's do one more here. Now, you can see a couple of things have happened here. First of all, the buildings are now, there's a streetscape with the buildings more character-wise towards the street. Buildings closer to the street tend to slow down cars. They have that impression that people are there. The less buildings are closer to the street, the more there is a sense of highway and speed. Now, I don't know if you agree with that, but that's kind of how the research has shown. You'll see also what's changed here, a couple of things. One of them, the sidewalks wider and there's street trees. And, the bicycle one's an interesting one. So there's the full build out of a streetscape that to me is the nature of the sense of place. You have the ability to have multiple multimodal. You've got bikes, you've got pedestrians. There's no ball boats on the corners here, but at least you've got that engagement part. You've got sidewalk dining happening here. A lot of times with sidewalk dining, you don't have cars parallel parked because of the exhaust. They're usually perpendicularly parked or angle parked. And they can't back in. So I know that slows traffic down, and some people say it creates a safety issue, but in most cases it doesn't. It actually improves that streetscape. So the SWOT exercise, we're looking at strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So the brainstorming exercise, and I'm going to just type these in as we do this. So the idea is to actually go through the matrix, and we'll start off with the strengths, we'll move to weaknesses, and we'll do opportunities, and then we'll do threats. So unless somebody wants to do it the other way around. So you'll see the positive attributes are on the left, the negative ones are on the right. External factors are listed as opportunities and threats, and internal factors, strengths and weaknesses, on the top. So when we go through this exercise, the goal is to actually start talking about what weaknesses can be created as strengths. That's the evaluation part. There'll be some mix of this, and I don't know if we'll get through this, probably not today, but at least start to craft a framework around your values and what you see as important within the community itself. So let's start off. Kevin, strengths.
Public lands nearby. Do I get to list one or as many as I can think of?
As many as you want.
Okay. I think the fact that we're a small town I think, maybe a lot of us take that for granted, but I know when I first moved here 30 years ago, it made a very strong impression on me coming from a bigger urban area. And I still think a lot of people who live here, like that aspect.
What is there about the small town besides that? What that you don't like about what makes it better than a big urban area?
Well, I think there's streets. I mean, big urban areas have their virtues as well, but I think with the small town, it's more normal just to strike up a conversation with strangers in a store or something. You're walking, you're checking out your groceries, and you're just seeing a pretty high percentage of people and can talk with. Whereas if you were living in a higher population area, probably everybody around you at the grocery store would be a stranger. So that's one aspect of it. Another thing that, again, I'm thinking back 30 years ago when I was better able to do the contrast. The first county commission meeting I went to, I was just impressed that people would go and say, hey, my taxes are messed up. And they would just talk directly to the elected officials and try to solve problems. Again, it's very, very different if the population's higher. It might not seem this way to some of us, but I think of Moab as a fairly friendly place in kind of a political sense. And that I feel like even my political arch nemesis, I can still have a friendly conversation with them if I bump into them at the grocery store. And it's, I think there are parts of this country where that's not true. And that's probably true throughout Utah. I don't think it's anything unique to Moab, but it's one advantage we have over some places. So I think I'll stop now. I think other people probably.
Okay, very good. Thanks. Okay, Jacques. You want to go to Jacques next?
Yeah, I think you can summarize some of what Kevin said as community. When I moved here 20 years ago, the first thing I noticed was just a very accessible community. I felt embraced by people in various circles, and I very much appreciated that. I also, like Kevin, came from a much bigger place, and found that very enticing to me coming to Moab. And again, to echo the public lands, but just our place, just the natural beauty and the access. For me, the biggest thing with Moab is the access to outdoor recreation. That's my favorite thing about Moab. And so many forms of outdoor recreation.
Okay, very good. And let's go to Sarah next.
I think about our green space, but also like the legacy of agriculture and the irrigation ditches. Like if you're driving from Tucson north, you pass through many, many, many communities, and then you come to Moab and you see how green it is and how many trees there are. And it's a stark difference to the desert around us. And I think that's something that helps us all cultivate a sense of place here. I think also our riparian areas, because we are in a desert, those are really important, and access to those healthy riparian areas is important. I'll let others go.
Okay, let's go to Mary.
I think one of the things I love about this area is you can make a difference, a real positive difference if you put your mind to it. And that's very exciting. In other areas, it's a lot harder to have your voice heard and make a positive change. I think we're blessed with having LaSalle Mountains right next to us. I mean, in so many ways, mostly our, the aquifer and just the recreation and such that the LaSalles give us, plus having a major river flowing right next to us is pretty, just, it's wonderful. I like the diversity that for a Utah town, there's a little more diversity in than there are in many of the Utah towns, not compared to other states and other places, but for Utah, there's more diversity, and I really like that. I like the fact that Moab has always had has leaned towards being more pretty artistic, that it seems to attract people who are excited about the arts and find art to be an important part of their life. There's so much. I think it's a great place to raise kids. You know, it's also can be a struggle depending on a lot of things, but as far as being able to get your kids outdoors and doing things of that nature, it's a great place. They can have a lot more freedom than in other places. And I like the fact there's no
We lose you? Did we lose you, Mary?
okay.
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
the fact that we don't have a lot of big box stores. Sometimes I miss having more. Seems like we've lost some to where we don't have any choice, which is a problem. If you want to buy something fairly simple, you can't find it sometimes. But I like that we don't have big Targets and Walmarts and things like that. People that live here aren't addicted to shopping. That's, I think, I can't, if I think of anything else, I'll pipe back in.
Okay, and let's go to Evan.
Man, I got to scrape for crumbs here.
We're going to ask you
think-
first in the next one. Okay,
I
so
think one of the things that I appreciate is connectivity. I think a lot of these kind of small town remote qualities that we're talking about, you could still find in the deep reaches of Alaska or someplace, but here we actually have an interstate, we have an airport. You know, we can get to a box store if we need to. We can get further to other places. And kind of with that in mind, you know, I think that our healthcare that we have here is worthwhile. You know, it helps not feel as remote or as on your own. That's kind of like, I might lump that in with some other sort of essential services that I think we do well with. I think with some of that.
what are those, Evan? What are the essential services?
You know, I think that for the size of our community, for this, you know, being in a rural setting, I think that we have a really strong emergency medical service. I think that, you know, our per capita law enforcement is really high, and things like that. Kind of like I was saying, that you can jump on a plane. There's helicopters to scoop you up out of the backcountry. You know, you could be in a front country setting very quickly here compared to some other rural, remote, you know, areas full of public land and that kind of stuff. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think, you know, to kind of flesh out on some of the other points, you know, like how Jacques was bringing up, it's not just public land. There's other places that are surrounded by a lot of public land, but the quality of our public land, the qualities that it has, the kind of beauty sort of sense is important to highlight. And because that's something that we can capitalize on. And with that sense of recreation, easily accessible, I think that there are still quiet places close to home. And I think that that's a value that's really a strength. And I'm sure we'll kind of get into that when we move into threats. but it's not just recreation, but this kind of like there's a special space for that. Kind of with the idea of like community, another thing that's kind of unique to our community that I might not kind of see in Park City or Sedona is we're still kind of weird, still a little trashy, still a little like avant-garde. And I don't really know the best way to kind of capture that, but I think that that's also something that's been under threat lately. And, I think people always want to preserve this idea of like, the Haydukes or all these Ed Abbey characters that can just kind of like jump into a truck and end up in the desert and write poetry and howl at the moon and do things like that I think that's an important thing why people love Moab and Grand County. To the idea of like small town and what is it about a small town. When I was debating whether to move here or another location, I had narrowed it down to two places. And one of the things that attracted me to Grand County was that there was less traffic than the other place I was looking at. So I think that when we see Sedona highlighting their traffic, that's actually a thing that people look at both as residents and visitors is do they have to deal with traffic? And that's something that we hear a lot of is frustrations of dealing with traffic. Another sort of thing is that attracted me to this area more than others was the affordability at the time. I was able to rent a house for my family and get in because it wasn't as crazy as some of the other resort towns. And I think that a lot of us are kind of scared with the direction that's going. And then one last thing that I just kind of was riffing off of is that it feels really safe. My kids bike to school. I cut them loose. I don't see them till after dark. People aren't locking their doors at the grocery store. It's a lot different vibe than some of the other areas you go to that might struggle with crime and other threats like that. And I think that that's really what kind of adds to the experience of being here.
Really good. Yeah, that's great. Did I miss anyone? Did I miss Gabe? Did I get you?
Yeah. Great job, everyone. A few of those last ones that Evan mentioned really resonate with me as well. That last one in terms of just kind of vandalism and theft not being something that you run into too often in Grand County. I have a hard time when I leave Grand County, I have a hard time getting into the habit of locking things because I'm just so used to leaving everything open. And I value that a lot about living in Grand County. And then just with regards to the cultural traits in terms of like, Evan mentioned weird. And I would say like there's a specific sense of grit and humility that is present in Grand County. We don't have that. It's very approachable as opposed to kind of the exclusive luxury kind of vibe that comes off of other, some of the other places that we've mentioned, like Park City and Sedona. That I think it makes it accessible. It lacks pretension, and I think that's really a valuable trait. I think the cultural history of the county is really interesting on a human scale. And it's also obviously an incredible geological history of the surrounding area. And I think that those two things playing off of each other are great strengths. And then, with that geological history and that aspect, I think that there's a presence of science, of scientists and folks that have a strong appreciation for the natural world. And I think that that's something that that is a thread woven throughout the population in Grant County. I think, yeah, and one more thing about like sort of the cultural trait of the county that I sense is like it's kind of a work hard, play hard community. I think that's something that I think you know, folks are really, you know, working hard and, you know, making a living in the way that they can, and then but also turning around and making sure to get and making use of all of the access around us. There was one other thing I wanted to mention because everyone else did such a great job. Oh yeah, well, one thing I liked about the language in the Sedona slide that you showed was they made mention of it being a treasure, you know, protecting a treasure of the entire world. They used that sort of planetary scale to describe Sedona. And I wouldn't hesitate to use the same sort of descriptor, you know, of Grant County being one of the most beautiful places on the planet.
I call it Sedona times 10.
I just have one more to throw in there, which is that we have local news outlets. We have KCMU, The Sun, and The Times, and that's rarer and rarer in this world.
So newspaper, news, radio, is there, I don't know about radio, yeah?
Yeah. KCMU.
Yeah. Right.
I want to throw something else in there as well, is that I don't know if you want to say entrepreneurship or when there's a need that needs to be filled. You look at the number of nonprofits in our community, you know, like at one time they said, you know, we have our minorities aren't being helped or recognized, and so all of a sudden there's the Multicultural Center. Our kids aren't experiencing gardening, and there's the you know, Youth Garden Project. We were the first town, the first county in the state, and one of the first in the nation that had Seek Haven, a place to help house people with dealing with domestic violence. So I think our nonprofits and our willingness to figure out ways to fulfill needs is exceptional in Moab. And I also think Moab or Grand County has a history of being non-sexist. We were the first county in the state to have a female commissioner, the first county in the state to have a female superintendent and mayor. And when you compare women in leadership roles, Utah was ranked one of the lowest, but Grand County's the highest in the state and ranks closer to more liberal states. So I think that's a real positive.
And I'll just double dip since Trish isn't here, but I think that the rural agricultural feel of the county is still a strength. And I think that that's something that's being lost, you know, across the country. And it's nice to have that in the county.
And going along with that and the historical, a bit of the just the old West feel of it. When I first moved to town, they were still doing the cattle drive down Main Street, and just when you go out Spanish Valley Drive, just like Evan said, that rural feel. There's still horses, and I really appreciate that coming from the East Coast.
Yeah, just because Trish isn't here, and sort of another take on what Evan just said. I think, you know, just within Spanish Valley, we do have variety in terms of more dense versus more open and rural areas. And I know a lot of people living further south in the county really value the fact that things are spread out there. And I think it's good that, you know, with it, you know, people who want to live in a denser area, that there are options, they can do that, but there's also options to have the more rural stuff.
Okay, that's great. You guys are amazing to say. So when I talked to Chris about this earlier, I said we did have some examples. We actually ran a test drive through our little department, and within 40 minutes, they came up with a bunch of things. So I thought I'd show those, but then Chris said, well, I don't know if I would show them. You don't want to drive them. Yes, they'll come up their own. And you guys, amazing. So now we're going to go to Evan because he picked up some of the crumbs there. And we're going to go to weaknesses first to Evan.
Oh gosh, now I'm gonna feel like I'm pointing the finger. Well, I would probably like do the inverse of everything I just said, right? Like we do have traffic. The affordability is
This traffic, what bugs you about traffic?
I would there's congestion along 191, and then that's rippling out into side streets. 500 West and Cane Creek Boulevard are all kind of feeling the overflow of 191. Truck traffic on our main street, that's something that tourists bring up a lot. Yeah, you were talking about you don't want to parallel park a car in front of a sidewalk cafe. Well, you don't really want to like have a semi barreling down every 4 cars or something.
Is that it, Evan? Or are you you
Well,
got the whole enchilada now?
No, that's a strength. The affordability is or the lack of affordability. I don't know what you would call the expense, the cost of living. Going back to just like I said, connectivity was a strength. I think it's also a weakness of how remote we are. It's kind of a challenge in trying to diversify the economy when any kind of like manufacturing would have additional shipping costs and things being remote. I think as our population ages, and there's more folks needing more healthcare, that's challenging as well to kind of be able to provide all that locally, especially as things become more specialized. It's if you need a burn unit or something, that's not something that we're going to have locally. We are kind of seeing more and more needs for law enforcement, especially on these public lands, because the public lands are not very supported by the owners or the agencies that are managing them in terms of managing visitors and people and what's going on out there.
What is going on out there? What is going on out there?
The volumes of folks, it's not the sort of free for all mentality isn't as sustainable, if we want to protect this planetary treasure. So illegal camping, illegal pooping, illegal travel, fires, things like that are impacting things environmentally and the experience for other users and things like that.
Okay.
I'll pass the mic for now, but I might double dip again.
Okay, pick someone to pass it to.
I'll go Gabe since he was towards the end.
Thanks. Currently experiencing a critical housing shortage. Serious questions about the future of availability of water in the county. Lack of resources for mitigating the impacts of our visitor economy. wages that aren't keeping up with the cost of living. And lastly, I'll mention we do have several very nice facilities, and we're building, I think that there are, new ones coming online here as well. But I think that some of our, specifically our county facility, like our office facilities, for example, for our staff, like the one that you're in, Mr. Gunther, I would say currently we could really use an update there. A fresh look there is badly needed.
We just changed a bunch of things, Gabe. You have to come visit. We just got some new furniture.
Very nice. But that's that. Yeah, I'll leave that there.
Do you want to pass? Who do you want to pass to, Gabe?
Pass it to Sarah.
I think the inability to manage our natural resources, which obviously has many reasons, but I think of cattle grazing and climate change and dust and the road network in Grand County. All of these things I think they're a liability to us.
What about the road network, Sarah?
I personally think it's too big and sprawling, and it was never developed with a vision, and so it has impacts that are difficult to manage. I think we have a weakness, we haven't identified our wildlife corridors and areas that we need to protect for wildlife in planning trails and keeping roads open, that kind of thing. I think lots of what folks have already said as far as weaknesses I agree with. I think that our lack of diversity is a weakness. We're a very white dominated community, as you can see by who's on the county commission, and I would like to see more diversity and representation.
And who's underrepresented as far as people here? I mean,
I think Native populations and also the Hispanic population. That's actually pretty large in Moab, but is underrepresented. I think that maybe I'll just pass it. I'll let other folks speak as well.
You can pass.
To Mary.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. I've been kind of brainstorming. We didn't say it directly, but I think UTVs are a real problem in our community. I also think the damage that's happening at the backcountry because it's becoming so much more easily to access because of the UTVs is a big problem. Something we don't see because we tend to not deal very much with the underbelly of Grand County, but there is a huge drug and alcohol problem in Grand County, and we have a higher teen suicide rate than many counties in the state. That is really concerning to me. And the fact that we are homeless, that we had a homeless person die of exposure last winter, to me is a real something we should really be ashamed of and question ourselves as to why are we allowing people to be outdoors when it's minus degrees out, that we are ignoring the fact that we have people that are that poor. We have a lack of quality daycare, especially for our young children that don't have families to help them back up. We have problems recruiting and keeping some oftentimes qualified teachers, nurses, doctors, therapists, law enforcement. Our sheriff's department is very, very much understaffed. If you try to get into a therapist, it can take you up to 2 to 3 months. And if you're in crisis, that is way too long to lack. I also put lack of diversity. And I'm concerned for some of our, a lot of our jobs are being filled by undocumented workers who are keeping our, restaurants and such open, and yet oftentimes feel fearful and are afraid to report abuses. I've talked to some undocumented people that, are very afraid. Women, undocumented women who have been accosted and are afraid to go and report that they have been violated. Let me see, I was looking through this. Water, of course. So those are some of the things I wrote down. I thought of one more thing on the positive, was that we have 4 seasons. I think that's really a positive. But I think I looked through my notes, and that's what I had as the things that I think are our weaknesses.
Okay. And
Oh, and dark skies are a positive. Nobody mentioned dark skies. That I can see, watch shooting stars at night in my backyard. Kevin?
Let's see, I was jotting down some notes. So I guess one thing I want to do is I want to distinguish between weaknesses that affect maybe almost all communities or almost all communities our size versus things that are more unique to us. So to me, I think the biggest problem is just we're bumping up against our limits in terms of carrying capacity and how many people can, sort of live in this place without making things worse for everybody. And I want to distinguish a few different things. One is it affects the small town feel, and that's an issue that I think, any town of our size, which is growing, would face. But something that's a little more particular to us are the water limits, which I think have already been mentioned. We will never know with certainty just what, how much water we can sustainably take out of the aquifer, but everything we know is suggesting that there's a good chance we're about at our limit right now. And so that means that our attitude toward growth has to be different than a community that have plenty of water. And then parallel to that, the effects on public lands. I think Evan and others went into this, but it's more and more common to go out to the backcountry and just see things trampled. And I think the desert, it's a really cool place, but it's also fragile. Footprints can be a really bad thing here, and tire tracks even worse. So that I think those are some very big problems. Another one is lack of economic diversity. Too high of a percentage of our jobs are kind of lower level service industry, tourism things. That means fewer opportunities for people who live here. A sort of problem which I think affects a lot of communities, but including ours, and we shouldn't ignore it, is sort of intergenerational poverty. I think there are people here who are really struggling, and we need to continue to look for ways to alleviate that problem. Someone else already mentioned drugs and alcohol, which again I think affects a lot of communities, but ours is one of them. Getting a little bit more specific, I think we overbuilt tourist lodging over the past 10 years or so, and that's we've shut the barn door, but a lot of the horses had already left, or whatever that metaphor is, and that's something we've got to struggle with now, because it creates incentives for people who own hotels, et cetera, to try to continue to bring more people here, even if that's not what's good for the community as a whole. And I'll second what Mary said about UTV noise. That's definitely the one issue I hear the most complaints about. And there's two aspects to it. the noise in town, just making it difficult for people to enjoy their own backyards or living rooms. But it's also really changing the amount of damage in the backcountry. And I think Jacques has not gone yet, if I'm remembering correctly.
Right. Talk about crumbs. You guys came up with some good ones. I was just trying to think of, I definitely echo a few of those. One of the things I had down for sure was when I moved here, I was shocked by the lack of racial diversity coming from bigger cities or communities that had a lot of people of color. Moab looked extremely white to me. So that would be one that I had down for sure. And I was trying to think back when I first got here, some of the things that I noticed about Moab. I think a lack of especially for the young, like a vibrant kind of a music or nightlife scene. When I first got here was really hard for me coming from some areas. Like I couldn't just go out and see some good live music when I wanted to. There weren't very many venues for that. And I think visitors, that's a complaint that I've heard from visitors working in the shop too. They're like, hey, what's there to do at night around here? And there's really not much if you're into that kind of thing. And that can add a lot of life to a downtown. Another thing I think is just the whole, we're dominated by 191 from the north and the south, and then downtown, town's kind of separated east and west. I'm a walker and a cyclist, and there aren't that many places that you can actually get across 191 safely or comfortably. So that's a big thing. And along with that, like driving in from the south, it's kind of ugly coming up Spanish Valley. If you're coming in from the south, you go through these beautiful public lands, and then all of a sudden you drop into the valley, and there's just this kind of long strip of light industrial that's totally haphazard. Whereas I think other towns in the west that you drive through, all of a sudden you're in public land, and all of a sudden you come into a nice, cute downtown. We have a lot of kind of not so nice stuff south of us, and to the north of us, like Kevin said, the kind of unfettered overnight accommodations development to the north. It used to be kind of nice coming into the north. It was a little bit, there were some open fields, and it was more rural feeling and stuff. And now it's just hotel, 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 hotel. It kind of sets a different tone for your expectation of town when you're coming in, and that feels a bit negative to me, I think.
How is that negative?
It just kind of, it's not, like I said, you don't come out of beautiful public lands and you're dropped into a cute little downtown space. It's more like, oh, this is what Moab's about. It's about 10 big hotels before you even get into the town. I guess it's just the feeling of it, starting on the other side of the river even and coming in.
Like a temporary feel, like a trans.
Yeah, like a temporary feel, exactly, or that it really is a town about the visitors and not so much about the residents. It doesn't give it that kind of cozy feeling that some other places have.
So I wanted to add something. I don't know if this is what you call a challenge or a weakness, but Spanish Valley is kind of divided into 3 different jurisdictions, Moab City, Southern Grand County, Northern San Juan County. And so it makes kind of coordinated land management very challenging when many changes have to be done in coordination between 3 different planning departments and 3 different legislative bodies. So that makes it hard for us to do things. And I hope at a minimum we can, as we go through the general plan process, sort of collaborate with the city and at least get that coordination happening.
Okay. Very good. Now we'll go back to, who was the last one? Was it Jacques? Jacques, you were last. Do you want to go first on the next one then? And then you can just keep passing the baton.
All right, let's go up. What is the next one?
All right, let me go up here. Oops. We got a long list here. So it should be opportunities.
Opportunities. Can you set the stage for me with that a little bit, John? What, like, when you talk about opportunities for growth, opportunities?
Anything like that. Anything that opens up, you know, ways of doing things, ways of achieving things, building, planning, enterprise, business, anything you can think across all of those sectors.
I think we have the opportunity to shape downtown more and to give it more of a nice downtown feel. I would love more pedestrian and bike friendly access. I'm currently in Sun Valley for a few days, and there's just bike and pedestrian access everywhere. There's a lot more, you know, a lot less cars downtown, which is really nice. I'd like to see, I think we have the opportunity to get off of Main Street and develop some of the side streets more. That'd be a nice feeling instead of being so Main Street centric.
Yeah. We don't really have a lot of lanes here, alley loaded buildings, do we?
No. And once you do get right off Main Street, and I mean, there's a couple other streets with some businesses, but it doesn't have that kind of nice grid, you know, 4 blocks by 4 blocks or whatever downtown feel that a lot of small towns do, that I really appreciate. You're not kind of discovering cool secret nooks or fun things like that. I think we definitely have the opportunity to kind of shape the usage on our public lands. We've mentioned public lands are an asset, but are also being kind of loved to death. They're being used and abused, and hopefully we can do something to keep and enhance their beauty and let future generations live as much as we do.
How do you do that? What's that? What are you looking at?
Part of it, like working on a public lands bill, like we've been doing, just setting aside areas for different types of recreation. You know, keeping the noisy recreation contained more or less, and providing places for quiet recreation. Just protecting some of the beautiful places, some of the remote places and wilderness areas.
Okay. Good.
All right, I'll give it back. I'll give it back to Kevin then.
Let's see. So one opportunity, I'm still a little bit clear about the difference between opportunity and a strength, but so I think it's a lot easier to be a remote town than it used to be. Like something that came up earlier was the absence of big box stores. That was probably a big deal in the 1980s and 90s, but now, you know, whoever would, you know, people just order everything from Amazon or some other, you know, thing. So that's a lot more common and easier than it used to be. And so the fact that one doesn't have brick and mortar shopping nearby is much less significant now than it was 30 years ago. I think similarly, remote work and, you know, people, you know, having, you know, I think there's a lot more jobs that can be done in remote towns than there were 30 years ago. And that opens up opportunities for us. If, you know, one way that which we can diversify the economy is attract, you know, telecommuters, for lack of a better term, but, you know, people whose jobs are portable. And so again, that's an opportunity that wasn't available to us 20 or 30 years ago. I'm going to second what Jacques said about, you know, even though we're seeing increasing damage on public lands, I think it's certainly not too late to turn things around and save things. And I, you know, hope maybe now the environment is right for the county, you know, together with the federal government and lots of other people to change the management of our public lands in a way that can better withstand the sort of bigger crowds and more capable vehicles and things like that. Yeah, I can't really think of much beyond that. I mean, I think a lot of the things listed in the strengths column, sort of keeping those strengths viable is an opportunity, but maybe that's not what we mean by opportunity. So
Yeah, you could take a look at weaknesses and just think of an opportunity for some of the weaknesses that are there. And it's, so if you take a look at each one of those.
Okay. Well, I will pass the baton to Sarah.
I'd like to add 2 weaknesses. One is that
Weaknesses.
one is there's no public transportation inside of Moab, but also you can't get to Durango or Flagstaff and sort of Salt Lake or Green River. So that seems like a major issue. And that's also an opportunity for regional connectivity. And I've been thinking about this in terms of green space and like Moab growing more. And I love the green space that we do have, the Mill Creek Pathway. And I know that there's probably going to be a lot of pushback from certain Spanish Valley residents, but I think Pat Creek is an opportunity to open up more green space within walking distance of communities. And also, I think we have an opportunity in that we're not fully built out yet to designate more public parks, especially in Spanish Valley and around more spots within our community. Like you go to Salt Lake and they have giant parks set aside for people, and it is really important because it's a big community. And here, I think we take it for granted that we'll always.
Where was that, Sarah?
Oh, just like Salt Lake City has Liberty Park and Sugar House Park and all these big parks and greenways. And I think we take it for granted here that we'll always have enough public space. But as we grow, I think we need more parks, especially in Spanish Valley. Other opportunities, I mean, the remote work, I agree with. I think that we have an opportunity being in the Southwest and surrounded by these really strong tribes like the Navajo Nation and the Ute Nation and the Hopi. We have an opportunity to strengthen land management practices in coordination with tribes, and sort of how the Bears Ears is being talked about. Yeah, I think there's a really big opportunity there. And I'll pass it to Evan, unless Evan already went.
Thanks. I think an opportunity that we have is our quality of life, and that with that we can attract some economic diversification. Not just people working remotely, but as it gets harder and harder to afford the Wasatch Front or the Front Range of Colorado or the Western Slope, that companies that are looking for a home base might be attracted to what we have to offer them. On a similar note, I think having having the college in town will help with just kind of the community brain trust, or I don't really know the way to say it. We had kind of highlighted science as one of our strengths, and I think that we'll start to see other things besides just the hard sciences or that investments and that sort of stuff will kind of, that entrepreneurship that we had highlighted will only get better with stronger education in the county. Kind of on a similar mind, it's an opportunity that we have this, it might be a mono economy, but it is fairly vibrant. We are pretty, even in a worldwide pandemic, we're still experiencing growth. And the fact that that's healthy, it's here to stay. It's not going to disappear anytime soon. I used to say that it would take a huge tragedy or catastrophe to wipe out our tourism, but you know, there was just this worldwide pandemic, and it only strengthened it. And so I think that we don't have to necessarily, we can pour some of our resources elsewhere in order to build up some of these other aspects of economy. I think that kind of with that in mind too, like I know that I was saying keep it weird, keep it trashy, but I also think that there's a little opportunity to be bougie and attract some of those the kind of higher end brain trust sort of folks to relocate here. I know that when I was picking a spot, you know, 15, 20 years ago, one of my requirements was that I had to be able to get a soy latte in town, which was saying a lot back then, because you couldn't do it in Monticello back then. And so I think the fact that we offer this kind of quality of life that's not just the recreation and not just the setting, but that you know, we have this kind of community theater that happens, and I don't know, I'm just kind of riffing off the top of my head, but I see that as opportunity on the horizon. If that makes sense. Did that resonate at all? Okay.
Did with me.
With that, I'll kind of pat. Mary, did you chime in on the opportunities yet?
No, I don't think I have. I think I'm the last person. Okay.
Let it go.
Okay. I think we have, and Evan mentioned it, we have a lot of opportunity with the development, the expansion of Utah State University on so many levels, the opportunity to really help our own students in Grand County look to further their education, post high school education. I think the completion of the UMTRA project, it could open up a huge amount of opportunities. I think we have an ability to perhaps have some type of facility there, like Elaine was talking about, where you could have tools for people to go in and you know, do small light industry in that area. I think our railroad is, they're looking at using it, but I do think that's something that we have next to us that we haven't really taken advantage of, haven't been able to capitalize on. So I think our railroad, that we have a railroad spur right next to our town, could present a lot of opportunities. I think underused facility that could perhaps bring in diversity of types of theater and such as our Star Hall. Star Hall is an incredible, well, you know, the acoustics in there, the seating, it's a beautiful place that we could be, there are opportunities for having a small theater group or a small, you know, year-round music and things like that. I think could easily happen there. With music teachers, we have a real lack of music teachers in Grand Moab, so I think there's opportunities for people taking advantage of music teachers. I could see independent filmmaking. If we had a place for some equipment and such, say with the UMTRA project or something, when we fill that up, if we could assist people in independent filmmaking. I can see a lot of people finding this area a really nice independent filmmaking area. I also think there's opportunities to expand rehabilitation, that we could advertise this as a place to come, spend a couple, 3 weeks and deal with an injury and, you know, with rehabilitation. So I think there's an opportunity there. I think that there's going to be some opportunities arise with the new state park for science, for exploration, for all sorts of things. Those, I think I got it all that I thought of. Yeah. But I think we have an opportunity to really enhance our education, having teachers and people come here, to have people come to learn about specific things from this area, from dinosaurs to geology to water conservation to, so those are the things that I see are opportunities in our area.
And then I'll add a few things at the tail end here. We had some mentions of sort of ethnic and racial diversity being both a strength and a weakness. And I think as far as an opportunity goes with regards to our visitor economy, I think that sort of there's going to be more and more people of color, BIPOC people that will likely be that will be traveling and experiencing the outdoors more, and we can be a leader in welcoming those folks into our landscape and into that type of experience. So I see that as an opportunity. And also, I think Elaine's worked really hard on sort of responsible recreation messaging, but I think we're all aware that I think it's we're at the sort of stage where there some sort of national scale campaign and leadership in general is needed to be able to figure out how to sort of educate and guide people to experience public lands and our landscape in a way that's that's sensitive. And I think as such a destination, we have the opportunity to be leaders, to be recognized as leaders, as if we aren't already are. And then just on that same note, sort of, or not like just on the same note of sort of like what looks like such an unending challenge that we're facing with regards to climate change and availability of water and environmental degradation. Again, we I think have the opportunity to come together as a county and be a model for regenerating and thriving, and especially in this time with all the fires and whatnot, which seems like a very serious crisis. I think that it is, but it doesn't mean that it can't be turned around in a unified way, and it doesn't mean we can't thrive well into the future with the right strategies and approach. And so I think that there's an opportunity for leadership on a sort of a scientific level and a community-based level in how we respond.
Okay, did that get everyone? I'm not sure if that got everyone. I think that was everyone. So Gabe, you're on again to go first for threats.
Great. Threats. Let's see. I don't want to try to differentiate from weaknesses here. Yeah, I think in general, in the sort of if there were to be environmental degradation that continued at the scale that it's currently going at, I think that that's a real threat to the community's enjoyment of their own backyard, as well as the economy that's built off of the visitation of that environment. We have a lot of disagreements with state, at the state level, with regards to being able to put in the protections and sort of, create the future that we want to create here in Grand County. And I think that's I see that as a threat to us meeting that end. And I think in general, I guess back to the sort of the, in terms of the economy, I think that due to overcrowding and due to, sort of unchecked growth, I think we're reaching a reality where the sort of the experience in general, of the quality of the experience available in Grand County, it's sort of being we're losing the quality of the experience for those of us that live in Grand County and those of us that visit, and that could ultimately be the downfall of the economy, the economy that sustains us. So just maintaining quality. That's all I'll add right now.
Okay, who do you want to pass to?
I'll pass to Kevin.
Yeah, so again, I'm a little unsure about the distinction between weaknesses and threats, but I will repeat some things that occurred in the weakness column. I think, lack of water is a threat. And one thing that makes it especially tricky is it's not something, we can approximately quantify it, but it's hard to get exact numbers. And some people are going to tend to be optimists with respect to water, others pessimists. I think the overcrowding is by far the largest problem if you consider it more generally. I mean, I think there's a direct threat to public lands that's been mentioned several other times. I think it distorts our local economy, the tourism sector, which is clearly the best sector, rah tourism, but it grew way too fast, and the rest of our infrastructure and housing market hasn't been able to catch up. So I think because Moab became much more popular more quickly, that's why housing is unaffordable at the moment, and hopefully we can bring that back into balance. I think Gabe kind of mentioned this, but a kind of completely different kind of threat is interference from the state legislature. We've seen that happen in relatively small ways, and I'm hoping that there won't be a lot of it, but it certainly in conversation. Anytime one proposes some common sense fix for some of the problems we have in Moab, frequent response is, "Oh, if we did that, the state legislature would nullify it somehow." I don't think those claims are always true, but I think behind there are some real threats. Let's see. I do think that tourism is going to continue to be a large part of our economy, even if we're very successful diversifying. Tourism isn't going away. But the sort of cyclical, the annual cycle of tourist jobs does create some instability in our community. I've had people from the school board complain about that it's just very hard in our local schools for kids who are only here 6 months a year, and they move with their parents to some different job opportunity. So it's kind of a boom and bust cycle just within one calendar year that we experience. I think I will stop there and pass the baton to Evan.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that transfers over from the weakness. I think drought is a big threat to us in the valley, not just the Moab Valley, but the whole county. Thompson Springs is worried about drought, we know. Growth is a threat to us. I think managing and obviously as we're working here trying to plan for that growth, but all the other kind of impacts that come with growth in the county. And then the housing issues are a big threat for sure. And and kind of how that will affect community as a whole and all the other things. I was trying to dig up your slide about what a threat is, but
Yeah, I can go back to that if you like.
yeah, I think it was just one slide up. Yeah, okay. What obstacles are we facing in the environment? I think
Some of these are global threats, and they're not just
Yeah.
local. They can be national, global, regional. You mentioned state already, but
yeah, I think one of the threats too is just space. We talk about wanting to diversify things and create more parks and create more office space for county administration and stuff. And a lot of the things that we have a vision and that we'd like to do is just kind of like, where do we do it? Because there is so much public land in the county. So usable space, whether that's for buildings or infrastructure, how do we move the highway if there's nowhere else to put it. So that limited space is a threat. And I think a lot of the thoughts that I had were covered under weakness.
okay. Who do you want to pass to, Evan?
I'll go Sarah.
I think some of what I want to talk about has been mentioned, but I just want to throw out language that further clarifies. I think when we're talking about drought and the threat of drought, we should be talking about aridification and climate change. And a good median projection for decrease in stream flows by 2050 is like 17%. So almost 20% less water, median projection with climate change. It goes above and beyond drought.
Could I add resiliency and adaptation in there?
Yeah. And with that, climate change comes the threat of decreasing air quality, whether it's from our aging coal-fired power plants, which Rocky Mountain Power refuses to retire, or dust, or fires and smoke. And then, I'm always worried about the untenable situation with global capitalism in general. I'm not sure where to put that.
Global capitalism, so unrestrained economic negative economic impacts. I don't know.
Yeah, like living beyond our means, unrestrained.
The bubble economy. All those bubbles.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that all, or?
We have Mary still, and
Jacques.
And Jacques, yeah. I think. You want to pass? Who are you passing to, Sarah? Passing to Jacques?
Well, I'll pass to Jacques. He's unmuted.
All right, thank you. Yeah, threats. Something that I think is a threat is divisiveness and acrimony in our community. I think we saw a lot of that with the noise ordinance stuff, and divisiveness between like the motorized users and business segments and the non. And I think that negatively impacted our community somewhat. And there's other issues that have and will come along that could put us at odds with each other. So I think that's a threat.
In the noise thing, or other things?
Previously, a few months ago, when we were working on our noise ordinances, but I think there's definitely other issues that will come up.
Like what?
Certainly. I mean, I think the public lands bill that we're working on could have some aspects of that. Growth.
So sorry, public lands as far as access, restricting access? You mean, is that?
Right. Yeah, restricting access. I think there's going to be unhappy people on either part, hopefully happy people as well, but it's not going to please everybody, and it could lead to definitely some acrimony. The issues around growth and tourism are going to lead to some tough conversations within the community. Something else that could be a threat is that we are a bit of a one-trick pony with tourism, with our tourist economy. And if there is something that severely limits that, like a huge recession or such, we'd be at risk, like we were in last April, of like a serious downturn in our economy and in tax base, etc. And I would definitely second. I had a climate change, seconding what Sarah said too, is with things changing, we live in a dry place, desertification, area, more aridity and less water, and more people will is absolutely a threat, big threat.
Okay. Anything else, Jock?
I think that's all I had right now. So I think I'll pass to Mary.
Thank you, Jacques. And I'll echo it again. I think the biggest threat to us right now is climate change. I think it's we're only seeing the beginning of it, and if something doesn't happen, Moab's going to be. We're going to hurt a lot. UTVs, I think, are a real problem on many levels. I think just as all, and I think Sarah mentioned it, I put down greed, that making the almighty buck is more important than anything else. We have that element in our society as a whole, and we also have it amongst a group of people in Moab. I think uncontrolled growth is a real problem. I really think we have to limit the amount of growth that is happening in Moab. I don't think we can sustain we're a desert. We can't, it's not realistic to think that we can have a huge amount of population. I'm on a national level, which will trickle down to our local level. I'm very concerned about our democracy, that there's a huge group of people in the United, not a huge, but a large minority who still are denying the election results. And if democracy falls apart on a national level, it's going to definitely be a threat to everyone all over our nation. So I consider that a threat. I consider at times social media is a threat. The misinformation and ugliness that happens with social media is a threat to just how we function as a society and how we get information, and the misinformation that is out that goes on is a threat to us. Uneducated visitors and locals are a threat. They're just uneducated on everything. I put down throwaway society. Doing recycle in Grand County is a feel-good activity. We are too far away for many sources. We are recycling, and I think we should continue, but we need to reduce. We need to reduce in this community. We can't afford to keep throwing away all of this, using these one-time uses and then think that, well, we're recycling, so we're doing the right thing, because the carbon print of sending that recycle.
Mary, you muted yourself again.
It's recycling. I gotta put that over there. Recycling in our community on many levels is just a joke because the cost of the carbon print is greater than what we're saving by recycling. So I think that both that goes into the uneducated as well as the throwaway society, that people just, and they don't want to be educated. It makes them uncomfortable. Anything that makes them uncomfortable, they won't listen to, they won't hear it because they want to have the comfortableness of not worrying about washing dishes after a large gathering. I'm concerned even for our present commission, who I think is amazing, but the political will to really do something is going to be hard. And so I fear that the lack of political will could jeopardize any true change in the strategic plan. So I'm worried about that. I still think COVID could be an issue, just because as long as it's going around, it's going to keep mutating. And the fact that we have so many science deniers is a threat. A lot of these are global, not just to Moab, but it all trickles down, as Reagan would say. But not in a positive way, not in a positive way. It will trickle down to affect us. So those are my thoughts. Kind of negative way to end. I wish we'd have started with that and ended on the positive.
Yeah, well, we're still got another exercise here, but I'm not sure if we're going to have enough time here because we're at 3:23?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a pest exercise yet, and I don't think we're going to have enough time to do that if we want to break at 3:30. What do you think, Mary?
I would rather do a good exercise than hurry through it.
Yeah.
For myself. I do want to hear from everybody else. I think I'm extremely excited about doing this strategic plan. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chris. I don't know if he's on board, but the people that are pushing this, doing a really good job, can make a big difference in our future. So I definitely want to do it right.
Did we get everyone on this subject? Sorry, I'm not sure if we missed anybody. Yeah, we got everybody. Okay.
Did we hear from Gabe on this one?
I'm not sure if we did hear from Gabe, so I was wondering that too.
Yeah, I was the first one to share on this topic. Yep.
So long ago.
Okay, I got all of this saved. I hope it's all saved properly. And we do have a pest exercise, which is, I'm just going to quickly show that because we got at least an opportunity to look at that. So there's external factors. I think a lot of you touched on this. When you get into threats, those kinds of things are what you would consider not necessarily just local, although local is important, but anything that's regional, statewide, national, international, global kinds of things that you may not feel like you have much control over, but to identify those. So there's the external and internal resources that are there too. So the pest exercise looks at those kinds of considerations and political, economic, social, technological, and trying to frame these in terms of what those influences are. So there's some examples of stability laws, property rights, policies, human rights, labor law, trade laws, those kinds of things that tend to be so imponderable and maybe unmovable. Economic and global challenges, obviously we're all faced with some of those at some level. The social challenges, we talked about demography, sociology, social culture, education, obviously we talked about that, human development. And then the technological, as I think Mary touched on, the social media side of things, those are growing at logarithmic rates as far as communication is concerned and information is concerned. So we won't go into this one at this stage. If you're all okay with that, we'll kind of stop and pause and then come back with a second phase here at some point, hopefully soon.
So for future considerations tonight, let's talk about when we want to meet again. If we want to just continue this process of doing it before our commission meetings, or if this is something we should get to next week. So put that in your bonnet so when we get to our calendar, we can discuss if we wait 2 weeks, is it going to be far enough away that the momentum is lost, or would that be soon enough? Your thoughts, John? Is that soon enough in 2 weeks, or should we?
Oh yeah, no, I think that's soon enough. We would need some time to kind of crunch what you've given us, given a lot of information here, and put them into an evaluation matrix, which is actually part of what this looks at. Let me see if I can find it here. So there's what we would do is start taking a look at those strategies, and this is a company related thing, but obviously it's county and how these things relate to each other, and then start to craft some value statements, some objectives, and then work on a vision statement as part of that. So we'll bring some of this data back to you as evaluation, and then just check with you to see where that's at. So I think 2 weeks to give us some time to put some of that together.
Okay, so should we tentatively plan? I'll just do a straw poll. Tentatively plan to do a before commission meeting workshop on the first meeting in August. Jacques, is that something you can do?
Yeah, absolutely, Mary. That's great.
Gabe?
Great. Yep.
Kevin?
Yes.
Sarah? Sarah, did I lose you?
I just wasn't unmuting. I think I can make that.
Evan?
Yes.
Okay, we'll find out about Trish, but I can make that happen. So we'll get back to these in 2 weeks. And I'll see everybody back and give you a half hour. You can grab some lunch or something and something to drink. And I'll see you in a half hour for the Thompson Springs.
Okay.